Fit to be Toyed is quite an interesting cartoon. This is a Famous Studios modern Madcaps cartoon from 1959. It's directed by Seymour Kneitel and Thomas Johnson. It's written by Jack Mercer and Meyer, with a voice cast including Jackson Beck, Jack Mercer, and Mae Questel. And this is about a businessman called JG, and it's relevant that he's a businessman because we have this really interesting dichotomy, because we see him at this board meeting, he's wearing a suit, and then he goes home and he starts to act quite like an infant and is playing with toys, and he goes to see a psychiatrist to find out what's wrong. And I'll talk about what happens in a moment. I will just say spoilers from now, as I will reveal what happens when he sees the psychiatrist and what the psychiatrist reveals. But before that, I will sum up very quickly and say JG is a really interesting protagonist. He's a really likeable character. This is very well written. Some of the interaction with the psychiatrist is actually done in rhyme, which was really unexpected and something that I really enjoyed. And the animation is pretty decent as well. It's not my favourite animation style, particularly animations from the 50s. There are other styles from around this time that I prefer, but nevertheless, I didn't mind it. So in general, I thought this was a pretty decent cartoon, a really interesting concept, definitely worth checking out. So I will now explain what happens when JG goes to see this psychiatrist, because it's quite interesting. So spoilers from now. He goes to see the psychiatrist. He is determined to be proven like a regular person. I don't think that's the word he used. I can't remember the phrase he used, but he wants to prove that there's nothing wrong with him. And with the psychiatrist, he goes back to his childhood, and we see this kind of played out, and we see him interacting with other children, stealing toys, and generally not behaving very well. And the psychiatrist realizes that he has toy phobia. Now, to be fair, that doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense, because a phobia is a fear of something, whereas I think toyphilia might have made a bit more sense. A philia is the opposite. It's a love for something, and that's what JG is displaying. He is displaying this need for toys, and the exact opposite response of a phobia. But either way, the psychiatrist calls it a phobia because when JG was a little boy, his father didn't let him play with toys properly. And now that he's an adult and he has control over what he does, it's something that he's doing a lot of. And I think that that's actually a really interesting point. The fact that if children don't get to be children, it can affect them when they're adults. And that's not to say that every child who is denied toys or any kind of carefree childhood will grow up to behave like an infant, but it's certainly very fascinating. So I really liked it, and I thought it was a really interesting concept. As I said, I don't agree with the term toy phobia because he's not displaying signs of phobias at all. But the concept and what the psychiatrist was trying to explain, I thought was really interesting. So Fit to be Toyed is definitely a good animation, an interesting narrative, and one that I'm very happy to recommend.